a little bit of a primer. I always thought it was primer, but a little bit of a primer on the drop serve. All right, so we don't actually need to be on a pickleball court to be able to demonstrate this, I don't think. So this park will do fine. So first thing, let's make sure that we really differentiate between sort of like the two main categories of serve, two main kinds of serve, right? There's one where it's just like the more traditional serve, right, that you hit out of the air, right, like that. Let's call that a volley serve, right, because I'm sort of volleying it out of the air. And then there's the drop serve, right? And the drop serve is where you let the ball bounce before you hit it, okay? So those are going to be our two sort of main categories, and we need to understand what the rules are about each and where there's similarities, where there's differences. Okay, so when you're hitting the more traditional volley serve where you hit the ball out of the air, there's three sort of key technical elements that you need to keep in mind. One is that when you make contact, the highest part of the paddle can't be above your wrist, okay? So it can't be up here like this when I hit, right? That's above my wrist. It can be in line with my wrist, right? And it can certainly be below, but it can't be above my wrist. So when I hit that serve, I gotta be careful that this isn't above my wrist. Now, generally speaking on forehand serves, that's not too much of a problem. Where we see this fraction most commonly is when people hit backhand serves, is because it's a little bit harder for people to sort of drop the paddle head like this on the backhand, right? So you see a lot of the time when people hit backhand serves that it's often too high. Okay, so that's one of the rules, is the highest part of the paddle can't be above the wrist. Okay, so a second rule is that when you make contact with the ball, when you're hitting the regular volley serve, you've got to make contact below your waist. So you can't be hitting up here like this. You certainly can't be hitting like this. It's got to be below your waist when you hit. So if you're hitting down here, you're fine. If you're hitting up here, you're not so fine. Okay, so there you go, below your waist. That's rule number 2. And the third rule when you're hitting the regular serve, the volley serve, is that your paddle's got to be moving upwards, right? It's got to be moving in an upward arc. So could I serve like that? Yeah, you can serve like that using a bowling technique. I don't recommend it personally because it's overly limiting. But even if I serve like this, even if my paddle's just moving up on like 1 degree of an angle upward, 1 degree of an incline, it's still an upward swing, right? It's moving on an upward arc is what they say in the rule book. Okay, so those are the 3 things. Paddle can't be above the wrist, got to make contact below your waist, and the paddle's got to be moving on an upward arc when you make contact, okay? That, of course, is when you're hitting the regular serve. Okay, but everything changes as soon as you decide to do the drop serve. Okay, so first, let's talk about the mechanics, the rules about the mechanics. So we talked about the 3 things, right? The paddle not being above the wrist, and you got to swing upward, below the waist. Well, if you choose to hit the ball after the bounce, none of those things matter. Those rules are gone. You can swing however you want. You want to swing down on the ball? No problem. You want to, I don't know, have the paddle above your wrist when you hit? Great, go for it. All of the technical rules about serving, or the mechanics when you serve, they go out the window when you choose to hit the drop serve. So you can do things, like for example, hit down if you really want to slice the ball and put backspin on it, that you can't really do with a volley serve. All right, so does that mean it's a free-for-all when it comes to hitting the drop serve? Well, not exactly, because there is one thing that's monitored when you use the drop serve, and that is how you release the ball. All right, so in the rule book, it says that it has to be an unaided release. So what does an aided release look like? Well, if I throw the ball down, that would be an aided release, right? And you can see how that could be an advantage. Ball comes up really high, and then I could smack it like this. It'd be a big advantage, wouldn't it? It has to be an unaided release. You can't throw the ball down. You also can't toss the ball upward, like this. Okay, so no tossing the ball up and no throwing the ball down. So what can you do? Well, you really just have to drop it. And that drop can happen from anywhere. I could hold it belly button high and drop it from there, drop from there. I could even sit on my tiptoes and drop it from there. And if I do that, if I follow that rule, then I can swing however I want. So the thing to remember, if you are using a regular serve, a volley serve, you gotta follow the rules. Below your waist, paddle not above the wrist, and paddle's gotta be moving upwards. And when you choose to play a drop serve, really the only thing you have to pay attention to is that you're just dropping the ball. You're just releasing it. You're not throwing it down, you're not tossing it up. That's like a lot of fun.